Uh-oh. What do we have here? Apparently, there's a Hinderer in the house. Stay tuned, guys. We're going to take a look. Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 26 November 2013, and yes, we do indeed have a Hinderer in the house. This one is on loan for test drive and review to the Theapostlep channel by John from One All's Pub. You know, I was watching one of his videos last week, and I thought he said at the end, "That's my 2 cents, you can keep the Hinderer." But then I talked to him later, and he said, no, you can keep the change. Send me back the Hinderer when you're done playing with it, please. So I will. Actually, I never thought he said that. It was very kind of John, though, as I contemplate my next knife purchase after having sold 2 sort of expensive production knives, or semi-customs, or mid-techs, the Brass Division Flipper and the Pull Force Mic 1. Knives that I sold for the express and intent purpose of buying a more expensive knife. You know, one of these days my hand is going to get used to this knife. Not quite there yet. We're on day 2. And I was actually talking with John and told him, you know, which knives I was considering. One of which is a Hinderer XM-18. Another is the Strider SNG. The third would be kind of an oddball, more odd than I ever thought, a small Sabenza 21 left-handed Insingo, of all things. More of that story to follow, but since John is the owner of at least one of these XM-18s and also a gorgeous SNG stonewashed in I believe, S30V. He agreed to send me the Hinderer and the Strider to try out for a little bit and kind of decide which one I want. And while they're here, as I'm getting to know them, I'm going to share my impressions, a little short initial review with you guys. So let's talk about this Hinderer, and first let's talk about Rick Hinderer. You know, knife makers come from storied pasts. Some of the stories are even true. Rick Hinderer, though, he's kind of just a down-to-earth guy. He has a lot of experience as a first responder and an EMT, and he's certainly been a user of knives for his adult life. And back in the 80s, knife lover he started making art knives, and by the data on his website, the information on his website, he did so in a converted turkey coop without many amenities or modern tools. And over the years, Rick developed his craft and, you know, became over the years one of the preeminent knife makers in the world. And I guess the knife model or the knife series that has brought him the most fame and the most accolades has been this XM series. And it is a production knife but a very, very precisely made sort of low volume production knife. You know, the lines get pretty blurry about what's a production knife, what's a custom, what's a mid-tech. Let's just say each one of these is very lovingly made with modern techniques. And each one of them certainly has Rick Hinderer's eye and stamp of approval on it. I don't know the ins and outs of the process and who does what at Hinderer Knives, but they're extremely high quality pieces. Now the XM-18 comes in two sizes, the 3-inch and the 3.5 inch. We're looking at a 3.5. It's designed, if we look at this blade shape, Hinderer Knives calls it a Spanto tip. So it's kind of like a Tanto, and also like a saber ground, very thick drop point. Gorgeous swedge on the top, kind of neat because the knife does not change thickness from the base of its bevel clear out to the point where you see the grind change, and then it sort of dives to the tip in a convex sort of way, or maybe, I guess maybe it's a flat, just a different angle flat grind. And then weight is relieved from the blade by this gorgeous swedge on top. And look at how thick the tip gets before it starts to approach the point. This is designed to be a tactical field tool suitable for cutting, slicing, prying, piercing, designed to be field serviceable by someone who would use it in a tactical fashion. You know, not unlike its main competitor, the Strider SNG SMF. The same philosophy of use, the same intended purpose. Let's talk about dimensions, and we're going to talk specifically about the 3.5 inch XM-18. Blade length, no surprise, 3.5 inches. Handle length is 4 3/4 inches, gives you an overall length of 8 1/4. Blade thickness, 165 thousandths, which is a little over 4 millimeters for our overseas viewers who use the metric system. The lockside titanium slab is exactly the same thickness as the blade, 165 thousandths. The liner on the scale side is 50 thousandths thick. The overall thickness of the knife is 0.54 inches, and it weighs 5.6 ounces. The pivot and suspension system is kind of old school. I don't know if you can see inside there, but what we have is a 1/4 inch stainless steel pivot on Teflon washers. I believe Teflon, some soft material like that, synthetic nylon or Teflon, which I think is kind of interesting. Normally, that softish nylon or Teflon material, or even nylotron like in an Emerson, causes sort of a flexible side-to-side pivot, and I wouldn't normally consider it suitable for a hard-use tactical knife that's designed for prying. However, there is a design feature of the XM series knives that make that point moot, and that design feature is this thumb stud. And I said this thumb stud singular because it is one piece from one side to the other, press fit into the hole in the blade. When the knife locks up, the thumb stud is the stop pin. It locks up tight against the titanium on both sides of the knife, thus virtually eliminating the possibility for side-to-side play, regardless of how soft the washers are. So what that gives us is a super silky deployment action Doesn't need to be very tight, but a blade that almost drops free. In fact, if I could get it off the detent ball, I guess it's not quite a free dropper, but it's awful close. And it does sort of fall closed on itself. Deployment is super slick with the thumb studs. I know there are guys out there who say, they're not thumb studs, they're stop pins. Well, I'll ask the same question I've heard John Davis ask. If these aren't thumb studs, and Hinderer makes this knife without a flipper, the non-flipper model, what is it we use to open the knife with in that case? I guess they're stop thumb pin thumb things. They're thumb studs and they're stop pins, or they're a thumb stud, as well as stop pins. Pretty cool design. I've always wondered, before I ever had one of these in my hand, how they could be rigid with that washer system. Well, that's your answer. That lockup right there. The knife is, of course, a frame lock. The lock side handle is the titanium frame with the titanium lock bar, of course. The offside uses a really non-skeletonized titanium liner. Here's another sort of interesting feature. Can you see that? The closed stop pin. In this older generation, I don't know if this is a generation 2 or 3. John, you might want to weigh in and let us know that, because I'm not sure. The closed stop pin is attached by a screw to the titanium liner side, but it does not extend across the span of the inside of the handle into the liner side. It just sort of ends out in space, and it depends on its joint to the titanium full thickness frame for its rigidity. And when the knife closes on it, it supports it all from one side. Kind of interesting, and I think the Gen 4s have gone away from that, and they've also gone away from this screw. That on the Gen 4s, the closed stop pin seats into both the offside liner and the lock side frame, and I'm assuming it's held in by shoulders and can't go anywhere, so no need for a screw, which cleans up the appearance of the knife a little bit. Okay, as I said, titanium frame lock, pocket clip. I think it's stainless. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. It might be titanium. Very hard to tell. Not specified on Hinderer's website, and I don't have a magnet handy, so you guys can tell me. It is tip up or tip down. Right hand carry only. Wah, wah. Sorry, lefties, including me. Yeah, but I'm still contemplating buying one of these knives. I'm not going to carry it in my right pocket. I'm going to carry it, if I buy one, in my left pocket backwards, which, you know, if you see the way the knife hangs, there's about as much material left and right of the pocket clip, no matter which pocket you put it in. So, yeah, you have to turn it in your hand if you're a lefty. I guess I could live with that to get a knife of this quality. And it is very, very high quality. It's a proprietary pivot. The pivot head itself is 3/8 of an inch in diameter. The barrel of it's 1/4 inch, like I said before. Neat little finishing touches. The clip, as I said, is mounted either tip up or tip down, and if you, no matter where you put it, on your other tip location, there's this cool little trim plate that covers the gaping slot. And kind of interesting and old school, notice how all these screws are Phillips heads. Kind of neat. Now over here, for the standoffs, we have, are those Torx? My old eyes can't see, but I think they are. Either Torxes or Hexes. This knife has some cool custom copper standoffs, which are kind of neat. Guys, fit and finish on this knife are absolutely exquisite. Gorgeous stonewash on the blade and the handle. And before we move too much further, let's talk about steel. Current offerings of the XM-18 are produced in 3 steels, your choice. This knife, don't know if you can see that pretty light engraving in the blade on the flat there, but this is Carpenter CTS XHP, one of my favorites. It's kind of a Carpenter steel version of Crucible's S30V. I kind of like it maybe a little better than S30V. It seems to take a little keener edge with less effort, and I don't know that it lacks anything in edge retention. Also Duratec 20 CV and then Crucible S35VN also available. I kind of like the XHP, to be honest with you. But as we were talking about, fit and finish, just amazing. There's not a burr or an ill-fitting area anywhere on this knife. Really, really amazing. Everything is finished sort of to the same level. Not jewel-like, but certainly very precise and very rugged. The stonewash finish on the blade and the handle and the clip are like completely non-marking. This is not a new knife. It has seen some pocket time and been carried, and it just doesn't look like it. It looks pretty much new. The G10 has a pretty interesting pattern. It's not like super overly aggressively machined. In fact, when you run your finger sort of top to bottom, it's not grabby at all, but you know, back and forth, front to back, there's a lot of bite there, but not in any way that's going to cut you or hurt you. Even the jimping, it's got some sharp corners, but they're not painful. It's kind of weird. I would say the corners on this jimping are a little sharper than on the ZT Hinderer design knives, like especially the 560 and 561. This jimping isn't less sharp, but it's way less painful. I don't know if it's because it's a little finer, a little closer together, smaller teeth, or that it's not as deep. But it doesn't have the hand shredding effect that the 560 does, especially when you're using the flipper, which does take a little bit of pressure and a pretty good abrupt movement as it it's more of a push button flipper, and your finger does land on that spine jimping. Doesn't really hurt. Effective but not abusive is what I would call it. Talk about the blade here for just a minute. It is a strong knife blade, and it's pretty steeply ground. I guess you do have to sort of call that a saber grind. It starts from maybe 60% of the breadth of the blade and then runs down to an edge that's not super thick behind the cutting edge till you get to about right here, and then it thickens considerably and then sort of thins back out toward the tip. Interesting, very interesting grind, I think. Right here in the center of the belly is where the knife is the thickest, and you can see that by the breadth of John's rather beautiful wicked edge grind. So where the knife is really going to take the most punishment is where you have the most meat. So a little slicing capability is sacrificed to give you that stability in that area of the knife. The thinnest point is sort of right through here, really all the way up to about here. They also make this knife in what's called a slicer grind, which is, it sort of looks the same and through this area, and then sort of runs up sort of diagonally to the spine of the knife instead of coming straight across like this, which thins it at the tip, and then there's a distal taper so it gets thinner to the point, so you have a finer point, and the knife is definitely thinner through this section. if I get one, that's kind of what I'm going to get. I don't use my knives as pry bars. I like them to cut. Not that this won't, because it will. But just a slight difference in what I like my knife to do from this one. Now let's talk about the most controversial aspect of this knife. Because there's another thing I would buy differently than this model. As I said, it's offered with a flipper and without a flipper. And I guess I would classify this knife as an old school flipper. It's kind of small in profile, and as you can see, the axis of the flipper is very close to the axis of the pivot. You're not gonna pull stroke that thing. You know, it's not designed to be actuated that way, although I just did it. It's more of a push forward, build tension, and I pulled it back too soon. And push down. You know, it's a muscle memory kind of a deal. And frankly, I flip it better with my right hand than my left, unless I keep my thumb back here on the pocket clip to stay off the lock bar. Whoops. Sorry to make your knife look bad, John. Trust me, guys, it's me. But with all that said, it does take some concentration and some paying attention and a little more effort to make this knife come out with the flipper, especially maybe the first couple of days when your hands aren't used to it and you don't have any muscle memory. Contrast that to the thumb studs, and if you guys have ever held a ZT-0550, you know how silky smooth that knife is with thumb stud deployment. It reminds me a lot of this knife. You know, you need no wrist, really very little thumb movement. You sort of push at the right angle and you get just the right amount of load tension, and when you break it, it just flies out. Either hand. Just love the way it deploys with the thumb studs. So if I were going to own one of these, and I might, I will be looking for a 3.5-inch slicer, non-flipper. You know, I'm not going to be the guy that says a Hinderer is not worth the money because it's a flipper and it won't flip. Well, yes, it will flip. If you're a knife dude and you get to know your XM-18 flipper and you're not a wuss, it flips just fine. Now this one, I will tell you, has had a little help. John is kind of a master Hinderer tuner, I think. He knows how to set these things up so they're tight and free and they flip well. The big knock on these as far as lack of flipping action is the detent. I got to do this at an angle that I won't hit his knife on my table, but with a pretty light flip, you know, it just breaks that detent. And John told me how much the pull pressure is to overcome that, and it's not very much, like less than 3 pounds. You know, the more detent ball resistance there is in the detent hole in the blade, the more pressure it takes to break the detent ball, and then once overcome, the resulting momentum, if you have a strong detent, makes the knife fly out. You don't have that here, so you have to sort of build a little pressure working this way against the flipper and then change directions. Not impossible, but it's not sort of a modern idiot-proof flipper with an insanely strong detent on ball bearings that won't last very long. This knife will last a long time, and it will work the same as it does when it's new, or better actually after it breaks in, for many, many years to come. I was kind of surprised the weight is so slight on this knife. Not that it feels heavy, but it feels very substantial. You know, it weighs 9/10 of an ounce more than a large Sebenza. I don't know, the Sebenza maybe feels heavier than its published weight. This knife I don't think feels heavier than its weight. It feels more solid than its weight. Now I want to talk about ergonomics other than the flipper and the thumb stud. I love the thumb stud ergos, not too wild about the flipping ergonomics. There's one characteristic of this knife that I absolutely love. Do you think you can maybe figure out what it is? The Apostle P channel viewers. Yes, we have a functional forward finger choil with a properly executed base of the cutting edge. Whew. Thank you, Mr. Hinderer. If there's any one aspect of this blade that makes me want to own one, it's this right here. Notice how the plunge grind stops about here. My cutting edge starts here. I can sharpen it accurately, precisely, and sharply all the way to the base, and I can put my finger in the choil without ever cutting myself. How perfect is that? That said, I think some of the forward grip ergonomics aren't very good, and if I'm back here in a rearward position, the knife has unbelievable ergonomics. You know, there's sort of this natural curvature of handle to blade, you know, make it almost a pistol-like forward grip if in a thrust attack or a piercing situation. I love that, just love it. If I come to a hammer grip, it's not bad, although I feel like there's a little gap right here, I guess because of that curvature. And depending on how my hand's oriented, you see I got just a little bit of a problem here. If I use my right hand, that's a little more comfortable, but I'm still feeling a little interference from that flipper slash finger guard. How about the reverse grip? Interesting too, guys, this is a right-handed knife, and most of these grips I'm showing you I'm executing with my left hand, and I find the pocket clip to be pretty much a non-issue. I'm feeling it on my middle finger in the hammer grip, but if I'm using the correct hand, it really disappears. Reverse grip, beautiful. This handle butt jimping is perfect for your thumb. One knock I will give the knife ergonomically. I don't see any reason to have this jimping on the bottom. I know that's how they do it, but if I'm in a hammer grip and I'm really push cutting something that's giving me a lot of grief, a lot of resistance, that knife is torquing this way in my hand, forcing that jimping right into my pinky. I don't know if you guys can see. It's leaving a mark. And you know, over prolonged use, that's going to get bad. But overall, the rearward grip ergonomics are great. Now, that's sort of where the good stuff stops. When I come forward to use this wonderful finger choil out here, I just try to close my eyes and imagine how good life would be without that flipper running into the knuckle of my middle finger, because I've tried to avoid it, but I just can't get comfortable without that flipper hitting the knuckle of my middle finger. I'm just going to close my eyes, take a grip like I would want to take on that forward choil, and look what that's doing. I just don't love it. If I bought a Hinderer XM-18, it would definitely be a non-flipper. not only do I dislike how the flipper gets in the way as a finger guard, with this thumb stud action, I find myself just not using the flipper as I carry it and play with it. So interesting stuff, I think, because there are guys who love this knife as a flipper. John is one of them. He loves it, and he loves the way it flips. He loves the finger guard function that the flipper gives. I would imagine this is John's grip most of the time. And, you know, maybe it is for a lot of us. I love to choke up on a knife. Oh, I got comfortable for just a second there. The neat thing is, Rick Hinderer makes this knife for both of us. He makes the stout Spanto blade for the hard use guy, for the guy who likes to pry with his knives. He makes the slicer for people who like a pure cutter. That's still a strong knife, by the way. He makes a flipper, and a very robust flipper for guys who like that. And he makes it without a flipper for guys who think it gets in the way. Also, factory scales and aftermarket scales are abundant for this series of knives. You know, pick a color, pick a material, it's out there. Standoffs come in all different colors, materials. It's really one of those sort of blank slate knives that have lots of customization opportunities out there. One kind of sad fact is that Hinderer Knives doesn't seem to be able to keep up with demand. This knife, sort of as it sits, if you could, you know, be at the right knife show and win a lottery draw, you could pay suggested retail of $385 for it, which is $25 less than a large Sebenza. But the catch is, unless you win that lottery, or you work for law enforcement or military, you'll never buy one for that price. Because this knife would do, what, $550, $600 on the forums. More people want them than Hinderer can make them. So that's just the way it is. A used Sebenza you can buy for less than an MSRP. Hinderer, you're going to pay, what, 30, 40% more than MSRP? Which is kind of sad. You know, I think, although they're different, the Sebenza and the XM-18 are extremely comparable knives in quality, durability, and the ability to work. And, well, they ought to be about the same price. This is the first one I've ever had in hand for any length of time. Just be able to spend some time with and get to know. And I really, really like it. Just not quite in this form. So, guys, I hope that little bit of sort of ignorant, wide-eyed observation sort of review helps you understand this. You know, it seems like on YouTube, people who review Sebenzas and Hinderers and Striders and other sort of pricey knives, you know, Todd Begg bodegas, I don't know, we tend as reviewers to review them from this perspective, like, you know, we just expect everybody to know what this is. So we're going to talk about the finer points, and you know, maybe a lot of people like me don't know the nuts and bolts of what makes this knife what it is, or where Rick Hinderer came from, or you know, what makes it different, maybe better, maybe worse than some of its competitors. And hopefully I've been able to get some of that information out there today. But if you want a Hinderer expert, you need to go to the owner of this knife. I'm just kind of you know, giving you an initial impressions review from the perspective of a third grader who's never seen one before. I know a little bit about knives, I guess, but I'm not an expert on this knife. As an aficionado, a connoisseur, a user, a restorer, a refurbisher, a sharpener, I know a little bit about what's going on. And I guess I don't have to have seen 50 of these to be able to tell you what a great knife for $385, even $500. Really is. Am I ready to rescind my my proclamation of the Sebenza as the best production knife, folding knife in the world? No. I think I still like it better, but variety is the spice of life, guys, and you're certainly not taking a step down with this knife. Some of that's just personal preference. So if you have enough Sebenzas, or maybe you don't have enough, but you just want something different, or if you're, a serious user, like most of us are not, if you're a soldier in the field and you want a folder that you can service in the field and isn't going to snap on you when you have to pry the top off that crate, what a great choice this one is. Probably better than the other one we're going to be looking at this week. So grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And thanks, John, for the opportunity to review this baby. And remember, all of you, the word is sharp.